So I probably let this go too long because these walls are a little thicker than I'd like them to be. You can't see that. So there's the walls, and they're probably thicker than they should be. In fact, there's kind of a lot of a top. Normally, when you pull this out, you want it to be, this part to be real thin. I'd say it probably went for right around 24 hours. And I like to pull it usually at 16 to 20. 20 is usually just right. Because you're looking for this sort of puddle and slush. I break all this off in the sink. In theory, most of this ice is still usable in some fashion. It's just sort of thin and shingly. This is also when you cut yourself, because these little edges are very sharp. So, to go through with your fucking spoon, mallet, something clean, and knock that down. So now you should have a block ice. That's pretty clear. There's a little bit of hazing on top here. And that might be that this froze a little bit faster than it needed to. You know, the back is a lot thicker, you can kind of see, than this side. I don't remember which side's the front or back. I do know that my freezer has kind of a weird spot where if I put the cooler too far back, it'll freeze faster. Kind of weird. Alright, so now we're going to move spots from the sink. Alright, so this is nice block number 2, because I let the first one freeze all the way through, which was not good. I tried to salvage it, but I really don't think there's a way to salvage it. This end might actually be too thick for my needs, looking at it. So what we're going to try and do is cut, let's see, you see it? Yeah. Let me scoop that a little bit over. Okay, if I can give you a seizure, probably. Probably here. Maybe 1, 2, and then I'm not sure what I'll do with this section. You know, so we'll start by maybe cutting this in half. I haven't really established if scoring all the way around does anything more. It seems to make it easier to cut, but I feel like I've had more inconsistent edges that way. That was probably more work than it should have been. And maybe that has to do with how thick it is, or just that I didn't have enough score. But that's the first one. You know, I don't normally have this glass here, but this is kind of the size of the glass that I throw these in. You know, so you can kind of get an idea, you know, maybe 3 fingers wide is about how wide you want to go for these. You know, I should be able to get maybe 2 or 3 runs out of this. I find that you really want to get, you know, sort of a score started and then go. It's really hard to try and saw the entire thing at once. You know, if you had one of those like brisket knives that's, you know, 4.5 long or whatever, that might be good for this, but I suspect the blade is actually sharp for cutting meat, which would sort of defeat the purpose. You really want the serrations, because you're just making little marks all over it. I don't know if you could see as that happened, sort of through the ice. You know, so now we have this piece. I'll do sort of long chunks first, and then I'll go back and try to make cubes out of it. Just gotta record this whole thing. You know, I'm supposed to go out in the yard and work. In theory, it cooled off from the rain last night, but Katie says it didn't really, which isn't really surprising. The Google's like 75. I was like, wow, perfect. should have known that was a lie. I messed up here. You can see that I caused a sort of a fracture inside the ice. And there's a little chunk missing here, so that might not have been enough sawing before I started smacking it. I'm not sure what to do with these. These are really big. You know, I might have put too much water. I try to shoot for about a half, maybe 60% full on that cooler. You know, then after 16 to 20 hours, I have about the thickness I need. You know, like I talked about, was you don't want to try and cut in 3 dimensions. I don't want to have to also cut this way. That's really hard. You know, cutting this way, you know, one direction at a time, essentially, is a lot easier. Oh, thanks for that. I think I just stabbed myself with the ice there. Not enough to bleed, but pokey. That's what you gotta be careful with the actual ice part. It's stupid. Okay, so let's cut this into chunks like this, and then I can maybe cut it in half into 2 sort of cubes that I actually can use. Same thing, you know, a couple of fingers. But you saw that when I get a good sort of, you know, you're not talking anything super deep here. Just a nice, consistent score line. And you give it a nice, consistent smack. You know, you get pretty, I mean, this one was almost perfect, that first one. This one was pretty close. You know, I'm not having crazy amounts of shattering here. You know, a couple of chunks have come off. It's just plenty cold, you know. I do it in this tray so I don't have to, it's a little easy. I'm not chasing it around as much. You could probably do it on a towel. I'd be afraid that you would pick up a lot of, which I'm probably doing on this used food tray, but like, you might pick up a lot of junk from the towel as a result, which would sort of be less than ideal. Yeah, that came off pretty clean. Still, yeah, you can see all that. You can see enough of that at least. So that's kind of where we are. That's the first step. There's a lot of water generated. I went and I got the cooler. The cooler's off frame actually, so out of frame, you're gonna call it. I like to put the cubes back in the cooler and then throw the whole thing in the freezer. Not perfect. You end up with some that like to freeze together. You know, like, that's the thing with the thickness here is that, you know, that's real big. So even if I cut that down into little cubes, you know, I might get 3 out of this. These are probably a little thicker than you'd like. You know, but that's a cube, you're done. You know, 1 step done, throw that in the bucket. You know, you can do Collins spears, and maybe I should have done spears out of the thinner side of this cube, this run. And maybe that'd be a good use of, you know, freeze it for 16, and then take the very thin amount of water you have and turn that into those long spears for Collins glass. You know, but I tend to put these in with liquor that's neat, or, you know, sort of a classic cocktail that's a little bit more, it doesn't want the dilution. See, so I didn't score that nearly enough, which is why there was so much smacking, and then it sort of shot off in its own direction as a big shear line. These aren't perfect by any stretch. You know, are these good enough for a home bar? Sure. I've been trying to experiment with a silicone mold sort of suspended in this box You know, so it's a mold inside of a cooler. And then you break the ice free of the mold. See, this is kind of big, so I might try and cut this in half into 2 little rectangles, if you will, instead of a cube. I've had mixed success with the silicone mold method in that it's very hard to suspend the mold in just the right place and everything else. The commercial products that do this are kind of designed that way, where it's a foam box with a silicone mold inside of it. And the silicone mold is sort of suspended at the top of the box with a cavity at the bottom. You know, it's recreating what this is, except it's, it's $40 for 6 cubes. As opposed to, maybe $13 you spent on this cooler. I find that this little red igloo is sort of the right size. It's not too big, it's not too small. I wouldn't want to spend an hour and a half doing this to a much larger sheet of ice. I'm gonna cut this one in half again. I wouldn't want a bigger one. And if you go deeper, then it's just taking longer. This fits on one shelf in the freezer. We've got a side-by-side freezer. I wouldn't want to do, I wouldn't want one that would have to go in the outside freezer, because that one's usually full. So it's not worth the effort. The juice isn't worth the squeeze. It's probably too big, but I'm gonna keep it. It's nice to have a little bit of a mix. So some will be bigger than you need them to be, some will not. We'll go with another little one here. Not the best score there, I think. Kind of came off okay. We'll try and split this one. I think that bump, by my index finger is going to be a problem here in a second. Not so much. I thought it might shear this way. Do another one here. Maybe I'll just throw this video up on YouTube. Put it on the YouTube, as they say. Yeah, I wouldn't want a bigger one. If you spend a lot longer doing this, not only would you have a lot more ice water at the bottom of this stupid tray, your hands would be cold. And then the challenge is trying to keep these cubes from freezing to each other. I find that I end up having sort of chunks. I've done it before where I have sort of Tupperware in the freezer, and I'll do sort of like little trays of a couple at a time, just try and keep them separated. Like the offspring say. Is that the right size for a drink? Probably. It feels a little small for me. I like them a little bigger. I like them a little more cube shaped. Yeah, maybe not enough scoring there. We can try and separate this into more of a spear. This is sort of how long you would want one. It is just sort of a long cut. Yeah, but if you just go slow like that, it'll be fine. You're not doing anything crazy here. I don't know if this is dulling our bread knife. It doesn't feel like it is. This has never gotten harder. Cutting the bread has never gotten harder either. It's ice, it's hard. That might have been not enough scoring. It made kind of a pretty little mountain range in there, but kind of a shitty ice cube. So, that one's a little more usable, but that's kind of the size you're looking for with the spears. This kind of bones me, so I'm gonna square this off. And then we're gonna do a cube. I don't know why that first one popped off with my slicing. That's not usually how that happens. It's not like this isn't like a ham that you can just carve into the exact shapes that you want. They make little ice carving knives But they're really shaving knives. You know, it's one sharp edge, and you're shaving at the ice to try and clean it up. So it is sort of a different experience than this. All right, so that's everything. We're gonna throw those in there. We're gonna take our little tray back to the sink. Put that there. My hands are cold. There you go. You know, a big bucket of high contrast white void that you can barely see the ice in, but you know, cooler full of ice, and then back in the fridge it goes.